our group and that we can meet together. We pray that we can have the Spirit to guide us in our thoughts and in our words. Help us to understand what we need to from this lesson. And we pray for all the others in our class. We're grateful again for this opportunity and pray that we can have safety this evening, bless our families and bless our homes. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Tara. Well, what did you guys think of the case study this week?
I'm trying to pull it up.
It was a lot like I have an employee right now that's a lot like that guy.
Yeah. Well, just thinking kind of to like summarize, I guess, a little synopsis of the case as you think about it and you look at Thomas and his actions and the way that he acts. I mean, I took some time to analyze the rest of the company too. You think about his upper managers and the other people. So you think about McDonald, who's the vice president. I can't remember the other guy's name right now. Frank Davis, that's right. So you think about Frank Davis and their roles that they played in it as well. And kind of as you read the whole case study and the whole thing's lined out, I felt like throughout the whole thing, I think they all played parts and maybe doing things they shouldn't have. But I felt like Thomas just from the very beginning was very like, I want to be promoted. This is what I want my future to look like. And he was just always after that, always after that, always after that, and kind of always got what he wanted. And then as you continue to read the case, it just seems like because of that, he seemed to think that he was always the right one, that he couldn't do anything wrong, that he didn't need to learn from anybody else, that his approach was the best. And I think that just kind of had a great effect on the company and their ability to work together because he wasn't willing to really humble himself at all. I kind of put him in a category of being very prideful. So that's just kind of an overview of what I thought. But
I kind of had a different take a little bit. I felt like he didn't stop to think or realize that he was in a new job. He was doing his new job the same way he would do his old job. So as an account manager, that's what you're supposed to do is run your business yourself. You go run your business. But in this new job, he's got a lot more responsibility. And I think almost there might have been fear of change or fear of not knowing exactly what to do. So he just kept doing the things the same way as he did his previous job. He didn't grow into his new job. So I don't know if it was pride necessarily, but it was easier to keep doing what he'd always been doing, but that wouldn't work in the new role. So yeah. I guess we kind of said the same thing.
No, I understand. I saw it that way too, just that he was still stuck in his same position. But then I also thought he didn't want to be maybe managed by someone in the way that he was being managed, just because their styles were so different. He just wasn't willing to compromise on anything. And so it caused a rift or a conflict. And I think really it just came down to it didn't seem to me like he was much of a team player. He'd always been, in sales, you're kind of your own man. You get to do it your way. You go out and you sell the way you know how with your personal style. But once you come into that team setting, it's harder to transition. And I don't know, that's how I saw it. Just it was a harder transition. So I think I kind of thought both of what you guys are saying in a way. It just was hard to change his style and the way of doing things, and maybe he just wasn't used to working on a team in that way and doesn't know how.
It was like he took that first conflict where the boss decided the quotas, and he let that dictate his entire relationship with his boss. Instead of stopping to figure that out, he let that dictate and it basically shut him down. He just decided at that point he was going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Amber said that kind of the same thing. He said he was doing things his way but not matching what his boss wanted. And I think he kind of got off, like David was just saying, he kind of got off on the wrong foot with his boss. He thought, oh, he expects way too much out of me. I'm never going to be able to keep up with his standards. And because of that, he just kind of let that form their relationship. Instead of his boss being his friend, he was more of like, he's just trying to push him too hard and setting unrealistic goals, and didn't like him already is what he had formed his opinion on.
Mm.
And the side gossip really messed with him, because whether he realized it or not, going around to talking to other people about your boss, even if that doesn't ever get back to your boss, those people, when you're talking to them, are going to agree with you, because that's what people do. So you start get this false sense of security that other people think the same way you do, when in reality you're the one talking to them, so they're going to agree with you in that moment.
Right.
So that was really detrimental to his willingness or ability to course correct.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. I think he also just came to rely upon the relationship he built with the other lady, the Shannon McDonald, too, because they had so many similarities. They had backgrounds that they were able to talk about, and you know, he just really came to rely upon that relationship and thought, oh, well, my boss's boss has me in her corner, so why do I need to impress this other guy? I'm just going to keep climbing the ladder that way, instead of even taking her advice, because she told him right from the beginning that she needed to rely on this more seasoned members of the team, or just getting that guidance. But I don't know, it seems like you were talking about earlier, Austin, the little bit of pride was in there, because the more higher up lady took him under her wing, and so I think he just relied on that a little too much.
Yeah, I agree. So if you guys were Shannon McDonald, would you have hired Thomas Green in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he had a lot of good qualities. I mean, he still does. He did some impressive things. He learned really quickly the industry, and seems to be a good candidate. And then, just like with anything else, with any job, you've got to be able to prove yourself once you get it. Just because you get the job doesn't mean you get to keep it if you're not doing what you need to do. Amber said he was doing things his way, but not matching what his boss wanted. If there's a problem with the project, you need to tell them your concerns and try to work things out at the beginning, not waiting until 5 months later. Yeah, that's true.
I thought that he was a good candidate, definitely, for hiring. As I read over it, I thought, wow, he has a lot of really good skills. He's got a lot of experience for his age. He's got a lot of drive. He's kind of the new generation that can bring good things into the company. But as you slowly start to read the case, some of his cons were that I think a lot of those things, like we mentioned about pride, had just gone to his head, And I think he already thought like, oh, I've made it so far in my short career, and just kind of thought that he had things figured out. Maybe his boss didn't. And I think that might have been one of his cons, is that he kind of thought he had it figured out and he didn't necessarily need to learn from anybody else.
Right.
Yeah, part of his problem is he's clearly very intelligent, but he relied on his intelligence instead of using, I mean, his boss in the first meeting told him he needed more data. After that first week of meetings they went on, told him he needed to his ideas were great, but he needed data to back up what he was saying. And it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you can't prove it, it doesn't matter. And so that was part of his problem. There might have been some laziness, or he just felt he was so smart that he knew he was right. He didn't have to prove it. One of those two things. Either way, it was very simple. His boss was telling him exactly how to make him happy. You can innovate while still checking all the boxes your boss wants you to check. It just kills me. I get employees like this sometimes that, yes, you're going to do all these great things, but if you don't do the things the company needs you to do, it doesn't matter. You still won't have a job in 6 months.
Right.
Yeah, it makes me think a lot. I really like to watch the TV show Suits, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen it or heard of it, but it's about kind of this lawyer, a big law firm, and there's this one high up lawyer, and he always tells everybody that he's the best closer in all of New York City when it comes to law cases. Like, he can always close them out, he always wins. And he really is a really good lawyer. He's really smart, and he always thinks of these backdoor things, ways to win the cases on the TV show. But his manager that's like over him, that's the head of the firm, she'll always tell him, like, I want you to do things this way. And he kind of goes like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. This is what works. And I've seen it work in the past. And a lot of the times it just causes a lot of tension in the show with how they get along and how the whole firm gets along together. And I just, as I was reading the case, I was thinking about that and how it's really such a big thing that you're willing as a employee or wherever you fit out within your company or your workplace to listen to others and to let them know that you hear them as well.
Yeah, a great leader also is a great follower. Part of being a great leader is knowing when you have to follow.
Yeah.
So going off of that, I mean, you talk about great leaders, great followers. So is Frank Davis a good leader? I mean, what does he value? What is his end goal? What do you think about him?
So there is some prejudice there, I think, because he didn't get to pick his person.
Mm-hmm.
He had been working. He was in that job before, so I'm sure he'd been grooming people. But again, he told his employee exactly what he wanted. And then a month later, he told his employee exactly what he wanted, and his employee wasn't doing it. Now, I think some of the ways he went about it were a little aggressive, and he could have come at him a little bit in a more constructive manner. But if you tell your employee several times what you expect them to do, and they choose to completely ignore you, or at least ignore a lot of what you're saying, it's going to make you tense. But yeah, he could have come at it a little bit better.
It's just like parenting.
What? No, my kids don't do what I say. I scream.
Yeah.
Get the whip.
Maybe I just approached it in the wrong way. I don't get good results, but sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there was a little bit of Frank Davis. He was a little, it was almost like he was going to prove McDonald wrong. Like, she's like, I've got this great candidate for you. I've seen a lot. I'm really impressed with him. And there's almost like this little bit of him just in the beginning, their very first relations, like when they were in that meeting and he set all these higher goals for him than everybody else. I think he was kind of like testing him, and kind of maybe there might have been part of his personality that's like, well, I'll really show her like how he's going to work, you know? And I don't know that for sure, but that's just kind of the thought that I got as I was reading the case study.
Yeah, that initial goal, he really should have worked with him, gotten the feedback from him. But, I mean, Thomas did miss a meeting that week when the goals were set, so it's kind of like Thomas shot himself in the foot there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, he really should have one-on-one talked to him about the goal and stuff like that.
Well, and been open to feedback. He seems a little bit like the type of boss who, this is how it is, and I don't really want you to tell me otherwise. Just like in the other reading, I think he was more of that advocate style, and Green was more of the inquiry style, and so they just butt heads a lot. And I think with Davis, he just wanted all of his employees to conform, which I think that just goes along with the generational gap, because, you know, it mentioned that him and even the other, older they, I don't remember the senior people.
They were super old. They were like in their 40s.
Yeah, they were so old. Oh crap, don't say that. Anyway, and he was just a different generation, and sometimes that makes it harder. And maybe that's one thing that, I keep forgetting his name, Davis? He didn't want
Frank.
Frank. He didn't want some young kid coming in and messing with his set ways. I don't know. Oh, you're almost 38. I'm almost 40, so yikes.
Wait,
Where-
how old are you, Amber? I would have guessed you were in your early 20s. Well, shows you what I know.
That's so nice of you. Yeah. Oh, I'm 39. I'm coming close to 40. Yep, me and Amber.
Both of you are 39? That's no way. Hey, Austin, I'm the baby in this group besides you.
Yeah, I guess so. I took a marriage and family class that I had to take last semester, and like everybody in there was married besides me, so it was kind of awkward, but it was okay. It worked out. So.
Well, you two ladies do not look your age, or the camera's really, really good to you. I'm not sure.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I feel like this kind of leads into this, but I mean, we all have life values and life goals, things we want to accomplish. And I mean, talking about age, Thomas Green is really young for what position he holds. I mean, there's not very many people at his age that have that opportunity. So at his age and where he's been placed, what do you think he values, and like what's his end goal? Is he thinking, oh, I'm already climbing the ladder and I'm going all the way to the top of the company? Or is he really focused on the good opportunity that he's been able to have?
I think he thinks he's going to change the world.
Mm-hmm. I think he has that I'm a rock star mentality, and look at me. Definitely that pride issue that we were talking about earlier a little bit.
Yeah, I can kind of, I don't know, in a way I feel like I can kind of relate to him. The job opportunity that I have right now, it just kind of like fell into my lap, but I'm really young, and then within 2 years, probably everybody at the place I work for, in the department I work for, is going to retire. And so they told me that they wanted to bring me in and train me so I could be the department head when everybody retires in 2 years and be the manager over that part of the company. And it's just, as I think about it, it's like sometimes in your own mind, you're like, well, why do I have this opportunity? And I think sometimes it's easy to look at that and think, well, they notice really good things in me. I must be doing things right. But I've also had to learn over the past year of working there and working for them that I also have a lot to learn from all of them. Like you can't just go in and think, I can't believe they do things this way. I can't believe they do things this way. And one of the biggest things for me is mostly everybody I work with is closer to retirement, and they were all raised in the paper age. So everything is done by paper. I mean, every single note, every little thing, and it drives me crazy. And I've really had to come to appreciate, like, they're a lot better at keeping things and keeping conversations with people that will be important later than I was, and I've really had to learn patience with that, and learn patience in teaching people, like, it's okay to use technology. Let's try to scan this and just like work in little bits and pieces, but also to realize like that I can't be a Thomas Green and just come in and change everything and modernize everything and save the world.
Austin,
saying you're still like favor.
We're going to be ageist against you from now on.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a huge thing. It's a generational difference. And I don't know how old Frank Davis is in this case study. I don't know how long he's been at the company, but it's a total generational difference. No matter when you get into situations like that, there's just different ideas of how things should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with Amber. Frank has a tendency to micromanage, and
Yeah.
Thomas isn't into that. Thomas acts like he doesn't want to be managed at all, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. He kind of doesn't even give him the time of day.
Yeah, I thought that he was a little overboard when he's like, I want to know your schedule. I want to know where you are and exactly what you're doing. I think that was probably, that would be a hard thing for me too, for someone to want to know my schedule, like every step of the way, like, oh, I went to McDonald's today or whatever.
Well, but on the flip side of that, Thomas was using company money to travel, and
Right.
then he just was like, oh, this isn't worth my time, so he flew somewhere else. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely got to check
Especially in his
in.
first month or two.
Yeah, definitely needed to check in and let him know about his schedule, but I don't think he needed to know every little minute detail of his day.
Yeah.
But and then I thought too, going back to the paper thing, because it is hard. Like my kids, I'm like, just write it down. Write down, you know, I tried to get them a planner like when school starts. And they look at me like, what is this thing? I said, well, put it in your phone. And they are so resistive to having a planner. Anyway, and so I thought, well, instead of if writing things down and keeping it documented that way, if he has a device, just do voice memos or whatever. You know, find a way to make it work that is your style, but still you're getting the same results and your boss is happy because at least you have some type of documentation.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting to look at the differences here between Frank Davis and Thomas Green. And I mean, I don't know. It's hard to place a fault because I can see in the position that I'm in how each one of them could be hard, you know, like my boss that I have right now, he's very much paper and very much like letter of the law and nothing like if it's written down or if it's in this or if it's in this rule book or if it's in this state law, like even though we have the ability to go with those state laws and like change them a little bit and conform to what works for us, like he's just so like, this is the way, you know? And so that's been really hard for me. And my last manager that I worked for, she was very much like, I need to know where you're at. Every conversation that you have with anybody else as you're going around doing the software implementation, I need you to talk to them. I need you to record it for me. And like, I just felt super weird about that. I was like, that's not right. And so it's just, I can see the two differences, but I don't really know who you would put at fault.
Yeah.
Well,
definitely both sides have something going on.
it's really, though, the person that's going to have to change the most is Thomas, and not because he's more at fault, but because he's the one that's about to lose his job.
Right.
So, I mean, he could change the world. I mean, he seems that like that type of person, but if he doesn't check all the boxes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's like you said, it's his job that's at risk, not Frank Davis's job that's at risk. And you know, I think a lot of what needs to be realized is you've got to find compromise in any job you're in any situation, because that's how interaction with other people works. You can't always have everything your way, and you have to be open to change and be able to change the way you do things and see things in a different light and maybe see things from someone else's perspective. And then that way you learn and you progress and you grow, and then you do get eventually to that place you want to be and rise higher. And so I think compromise has a lot to do with it. And he just pleases his boss for a little while. I think he'll get there.
So if you were in Thomas's situation, what would you do? And I just want to comment, I like what Amber said about her boss, that she has to try to work with her and really get to know her personally. And I think that's been a big thing for me too. I mean, my boss and I have a lot of differences, but as I felt like I've come to understand him more and the type of person he is and things that have happened in his life, it makes it easier to understand why he is the way that he is and to work with him. So thanks for that, Amber.
We're waiting for you to say you're welcome, Amber. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I'm that guy that can't handle a pause in the conversation.
No,
You don't
you're
like
good.
awkward silences. I think another thing that, I mean, we haven't quite talked about too is
You're recording
Thomas.
this, right, Austin?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
that's
I thought about not, but
is he now I forgot what I was gonna say. Thanks a lot. I'm just kidding.
That's what I do.
way to go, David.
That's how I roll.
Oh, about how he makes all these assumptions about Frank Davis and is like paranoid that he's just out to get him kind of a thing, but he won't ever take the time to go and actually sit down with him and talk about it and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's find some common ground. Instead, he goes to outside sources, which we did kind of talk about a little bit, but I think he just needs to go and sit down with his boss and say, hey, I noticed this, or, I got an email from Shannon and she said that you have some issues with the way I've been doing things. What can we do to maybe find some common ground? And it just seems like there's just not any communication at all to try to resolve anything. There's just all this pent up frustration and resentment and no expression at all.
Yeah, I think he could definitely do a better job at being more willing to actually share what he's thinking, even if he doesn't think that what Frank is telling him is right, just to go sit down with him and say, like, hey, I understand that you want me to do this, but like, this is why I've been doing things this way. Like, do you see that, or do I need to change? Like, he's not open to that, in entertaining that idea or thought at all.
Right.
I think he needs to do what was in the other reading, and is go to his boss and say, here's my point of view, and like you said, why is it wrong? They're not asking questions, and when you keep stating your side of the story, this is my side, and then they say their side, and then you say your side, it doesn't go anywhere. But if you get them to tell you your side, and you tell them their side, then you can start to understand each other and figure things out.
Yeah, that's true. So, if we're thinking about the other reading, so how do you think the power and office politics come into play in this situation?
Trying to remember it.
I know there's a lot of reading between these two case studies.
I mean, the basics of the office politics were, well, I read like 4 or 5 papers to write mine, so I think this was in it, but it was what I was saying, is like getting in the other person's point of view and having them, because, well, it's what I said earlier, the arguing back and forth. You got to get in each other's point of view for you to be able to be successful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the office politics part of it is you get everybody with a little bit of their own opinion and their own way that they do things. I know where I work, like we have our front desk secretary and then a few guys that work pretty closely with her, and it seems like those 3 are always like being so political with each other. Like the one will come say, well, Paul goes out all day and I don't even know what he does. He only had 4 things to do and he's gone all day, and like she'll go tattle on him and then he goes and tattles on her. And it's just like this big thing of like they're way more concerned about what other people are doing than what they're actually getting done at work themselves. And it's been a really hard thing for me to figure out, because I'm not like that at all. Like, I could care less if the person that works up front doesn't do a single thing all day, as long as I got my work done. And like, I know I got what I needed done. I'm not going to go tattle on them, And so I think a little bit of that is like in the Frank Davis situation, like he probably feels like that there's politics in the fact that Thomas won't ever come talk to him. But then Frank, on the other hand, is trying to have every single thing on his calendar, and that probably drives Thomas crazy. And so it just creates that environment where it's not healthy,
Right.
Is there any other thoughts on that?
I think maybe something too is, and maybe this is a generational thing too, is having patience too. Thomas wants everything now, and he thinks if he can't find resolution overnight, it's not even worth it. But building that type of relationship takes some time, and you've got to have that patience to carry you through, and know that you've got to both have expectations, and then you have to build upon those and then come to trust one another. And so it can't just be like, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then think it's okay. He has to prove himself over time, and then also Frank Davis has to be willing to also, prove himself as being understanding and building trust. It's a two-way street. I think sometimes the younger generation is just not willing to give it time. Because I just see it in my kids. I have teenagers, and they're so about I want it now, and they feel so entitled to everything that they don't learn that things take time to build.
It's interesting you say that, because I always thought that one of the biggest challenges as a missionary in this generation is to even try to teach youth at all. Like, they wanted everything right now. Like, they wanted all their answers right now, and they knew like they could Google on their phone and say like, who is God or what is God, and go read it, and like that was their answer. They got it. They didn't need anything else. Right. And it was so hard, like, to teach that generation, to get them to like actually read and like do things besides just look at their phone and social media and the world for answers. So I think that's a huge point. It's something that's so true. Glad to see you made it, Nathan.
Yeah, sorry.
You're good. How'd your meeting
go? I've been talking with future career opportunities.
Yeah, you gonna be the next Thomas Green?
Yeah, as long as everyone likes me. What have we talked about so far? Sorry, guys.
We'll let Amber tell you everything that's happened so far.
Yeah, Amber, go ahead. Can you type it out for us? Are you keeping minutes of this meeting? We just kind of talked about Thomas Green and Frank Davis, their differences, and along with Shannon McDonald, like what kind of caused the issue, what their goals and values were, what was going to lead them to the point, who was more at fault. Just talked about a lot of different little things, and then we just started talking about how the other case study, which we read about the different like conflict styles and those things related back to that. And as David said, I made fun of everybody for liking paper.
For liking paper?
Well, yes. I was just telling a story about how I work with a lot of people at work who are like closer to retirement, who are closer to retirement, and they all still use paper, and I'm like very computer. I don't like to write things down. I just know I can do it all on the computer. And so then David was giving me a hard time about it.
Yeah. He said they were so old, they were like 40.
And we're like 40.
Never happened. Don't listen to these guys.
Whatever. He'll just have to go watch the recording and he'll know.
Yeah,
that's right. Amber's going to give me the meeting minutes afterwards. It'll be all good.
So what'd you think, Nathan?
Yeah.
So what was your take, Nathan, on the case study?
So I was thinking about Green and Davis and McDonald, right? That's her name?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, just like off the top of my head, I guess, I feel like they both Davis and Green, like they have their reasons to be the way they are. So I feel like they're both kind of at fault, because Green, he doesn't really like data and that kind of stuff, while Davis, like that's kind of how he works. And I think Miss McDonald would probably say that data is good, but that the high goals that Davis set or was setting, aren't really legitimate goals. And if I were like a third party, kind of responding to the case study write up, if I were like a third party talking to McDonald, I would probably recommend to her, I'd send an email to Davis and explain to him that he needs to understand that, like, the true meaning of a goal and how to reach it. And then I would also explain to him, or maybe like evaluate his experience as the position that Green is in right now, because that's where he was before, and see how his I don't know, like results or his data would compare to his goals that he has set, and see if they match up. And then I would probably sit down with Green, because, or I would have, McDonald sit down with Green, because she just hired him as the intern, or not the intern, sorry, I'm thinking about my career. She just hired him as the new guy, promoted him, sorry. And I feel like he needs to get a chance to prove himself. And at the same time, I think he needs to also understand that numbers sometimes do matter. I don't know. I think it's kind of a pickle, because they both seem like really good employees. They just don't really get along. And then I think Davis kind of has this higher authority feeling, and so he wants to kind of like shine that beam onto his lower person, that he didn't get to choose, by the way. So I don't know. There's a lot of things with it.
Yeah.
That was a long explanation. Sorry, guys.
So how, Nathan, like thinking about that, talking about that, I agree with you. I mean, I think they both have good qualities, and I think really the right answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But being Thomas Green, I mean, he's kind of just been standoffish to David or Frank David, whatever his name is. He has two first names. I get him confused. Davis, I guess is what it is. But how do you think he salvages like the situation, and like what can he do now moving forward? Like what can Thomas do? What can Frank do? And you don't just have to answer that either. That's to everybody.
Well, I'll start off. I think Green, Frank, no, it's Thomas Green. I think Thomas, he should probably step up his game in the sense that he needs to kind of prove that he is flexible with himself in the sense that like he can do numbers, and he can do presentations and that kind of stuff instead of just face to face. So I think he should be able to like kind of go out of his shell for that a little bit. And then I think Davis, I feel like he could probably keep doing what he's doing, but not be so critical of Green. Because being critical of him, it's just, I think that might have sparked the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it could possibly prevent it from happening in the future.
Right, and he hasn't created that safety that we talked about last week on his team. He's just a dictator instead of trying to understand his team's different styles and adapting to them and creating that safety zone so that they're comfortable talking to him. Ease up a little bit, I think.
I like how Amber said they get to know each other a little better, because it makes me think of being a missionary, which wasn't that long ago for me, and like having a companion. And a lot of the times as like companions, you've got a Frank and a Thomas, like literally. Like one companion's idea is like, this is what works, this is the way we find people to teach. And the other companion's idea is like, no, that doesn't work at all. We don't need the data, that doesn't matter. And so I think it's so crucial in moving forward that you look at all those things, and it's like once your relationship gets better, you understand why you feel that way. You're better able to work together. And I don't think they know each other at all. I think they're two people that are a little upset because they both feel like indirectly they've been offended in a way because of the current situation.
So they're going inactive?
Yeah, they're going inactive. But then they heard about 2 Hour Church, and now they're coming back.
It's funny you say that. Last week when I went out with the missionaries, I finally got to meet one of the people I'm responsible for ministering to. And she goes, I'm so excited about 2 Hour Church. was like, I hope you mean that because you haven't been to church in 4 years. I mean, it's a terrible thing to think, but
No, I think those are good things though. I think you bring up a good point there too, in the fact that sometimes that's like, and not that it's necessarily change, but adjusting the way that things happen can be a really good thing for a lot of people. I really liked how President Nelson in his talk, when he kept talking about the things that were happening, he said they're not changes, they're adjustments. And if you really think about this case study, neither one of them really needs to change a whole lot. They just need to adjust some of the things that they're doing so they can better reach their goal, which is just what the church is asking us to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point.
It is a great point.
Let's see here. Just kind of looking over some of the questions. We've got a few more to look at. So I guess this is kind of the last thing we talk about. I feel like we've kind of covered everything else. So what gospel connections are pertinent, and are there any connections between this case and this week's reading assignment? If so, what are they?
So for the gospel aspect, it's kind of like what we just talked about, is making adjustments to, part of it is you could see Thomas as relying on himself instead of using the resources he has, and that kind of can be like us relying on our own selves instead of trusting in the Lord, using the gospel resources that are available to us to help improve our lives. And so, and in that way, I'm not saying in any way, shape, form, or fashion that, Mr. Davis is like the gospel, but Thomas is rejecting the help that's around him.
Right.
And not willing to submit, not willing to humble himself to accept the help or, do the things necessary to get him where he wants to go. And this is just like us. If we don't do the things necessary to get us to exaltation, then, we're just hurting ourselves.
I think so. Like we talked about the like making adjustments, like small adjustments. I think also because Green, he didn't really support his higher authority. Right? He even went to like other employees and asked them, and they said the same thing. But like he doesn't sustain him, and we're supposed to sustain our leaders and our authorities. And so I think making an adjustment in a sense, because I know a couple people in my life that don't really sustain the prophet or the apostles, but they believe the church is true, kind of thing. Those little things we can adjust. We don't have to change that person to make them believe those things, but they can adjust them so that they can believe those things. And so I think that completely relates to Green. He can totally just adjust and, start to support Davis and his other people, So.
That's a super good point.
It is, and it actually makes me think on the flip side, too, how great it is to have our current prophet. Not to go back to the old thing, but he's pretty old. He's in his 90s, but he has done an excellent job at connecting with the youth and making those adjustments to this time, and he's been able to bring that generational gap into more of a balance. And I don't know, I think that's a great lesson to see, that even our leaders can make those adjustments as well, and try to bring in that safety zone and see perspective from a different generation's point of view. And I think that President Nelson has done an excellent job of doing that, and I think that the youth really connect with him. I know my kids do. They just love him.
Not to go off topic here, but this is something super cool about President Nelson that I want to share with you guys. So where I went on my mission, there was a guy in my ward who was over public affairs for all of the Western United States. He was really close with all the general authorities, and he was the one that arranged like Mormon Dodger Night and all of the activities in the Western United States for the church.
Don't you mean the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
That's
Dodger
right.
Night?
Thank you for correcting me. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So he said that President Nelson, they were on like a first name basis, and they would text all the time, and they both have this guy has a lot of health problems, and he said at one point that President Nelson did too. But he said that President Nelson, this was why I was on my mission, so this would have been, this is probably in early or late 2014, so before any of this came out, but he just said that he had reached out to President Nelson and had been talking to him, and he said, I feel so much better than I have felt in like the longest time. My health is improving. I'm doing better than I ever have at this stage of life. And he was just talking to him about how he's realized the significance of at the conference that he knew, like when they put in him and they put in two other apostles at the same time, they specifically said, in case that it ever needs to be decided, President Nelson would be the most senior apostle in this case. And he like how he really felt like he knew that was going to come to happen. And that's why he spent so much time studying the Savior. And I just think it's really cool to see kind of how that life transformation happened to really make him prepared for this time in his life.
That's cool.
Okay, well, I'll just share this since David's battery is about to die. So it says, share Thomas Green the rest of the story with your group. So it says, after McDonald's February 5th, 2008 email, Green took the offensive against his boss. He crafted a series of memorandums, emails, reports, and projections that exposed inaccuracies in creative forecasting. The data enabled Green to build some alliances with other marketing personnel who used the data to ultimately side with him. On April 4th, it was announced that Frank Davis was being moved laterally to an undefined special project. However, Green's tactics were unseen as overly brutal by many in the company, and although he won the battle against his boss, his career was irreparably harmed. McDonald distanced herself from him. By July of 2008, Green announced he was resigning from his position to pursue full-time studies for an MBA. We can only speculate what would have occurred if Green had tried to help Davis work, but of the discrepancies and problems with the forecast, perhaps both would have succeeded. So does anybody have any last comments going forward with that?
I feel like Green, he took that extra step. I mean, it wasn't in the direction that I was thinking, but he actually did something, and that's not bad.
It's interesting that he was totally on board with typing up reports and making projections to get back at his boss. But he wasn't willing to do all of that stuff to build a good relationship with his boss.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. It kind of makes me sad that he went that direction. I just don't like vengeful people, I guess. But he really did burn a lot of bridges, which is unfortunate, by going that direction.
And it is interesting that he really, like you're saying, Tara, that he, took, what was it like statistics and stuff about his boss and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do that in his job.
Right. And how much better would the company as a whole been if he would have just applied that type of energy to focusing on the company and what they were actually trying to achieve instead of trying to boost his ego?
I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier of pride. And it's like, if you read the Book of Mormon and think about all the prideful people and what they did when they became prideful, like, it's kind of that route that he took. Like, he thought that he was right. He was sure that he was right. He didn't care what anybody else thought, and he was just going to make it happen, Yeah. And it is really sad that he went that way, and it makes you wish that he would have had more of a willingness to try to work with people rather than just be so focused on proving that he's right, that he probably, that ruined his whole career there for a long time, forever,
Well, yeah.
I think
he still has time to fix it.
Yeah.
It's true. He's young enough that hopefully he will have learned from that mistake and evolved. later on.
How do you think Davis feels now, though? Think he feels bad? I would feel bad if I were Davis.
I would have resigned if I was Davis. I would have been ticked.
Yeah. And even like McDonald for kind of letting it kind of get out of hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I
You
feel
know,
like he probably. Go ahead.
I was just going to say just a small little comment, but I had a friend tell me this week, I was talking to her about just something that happened in my life that was kind of hard for me. And she's like, well, you can't go back and change anything, but all you can do is learn. And it's like you always hear that and you always think that, but I think that greatly applies to this case study.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nathan.
No, you're good. You're good. I did forget, though. Sorry.
We did that to Tara earlier, too.
It's all good. And I think Amber's right in what she said. He was too eager to climb the ladder and it hurt people along the way. I think that's a good lesson for us to remember, that it's not just about us. And when we make decisions based off of what we want, we need to try to be conscious about what it's going to do and how it's going to affect the people around us.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, and at the beginning of the case study, it said that Green, you know, he wanted the promotion so that he could be like a higher leader or whatever in his career, and he got it. And then, yeah, he kind of like stepped out of line a little bit and didn't think of anyone else. He was a little selfish and kind of threw him under the bus by himself.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of good things, and I appreciate all you guys being here and being willing to share your thoughts. I mean, I guess just some of the main takeaways that I've had as we've talked about it is just to be able to reflect in our personal lives and maybe think whatever situations we're in, whether it's at work or at school or at church, with those that we are associate with in our lives, that we are able to more willingly look and listen and be willing to work with them rather than to get stuck in our own ways. Because I know personally, sometimes it's easy just to think, well, I've got this figured out, I can take care of it, and you kind of forget to look to others. So I just appreciate it. And is there anything else that you guys have?
I think I'm good. Sorry I was late.
You're good.
We're
You're
glad
out
you.
doing- Yeah, you're out doing what's really school is trying to teach you, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, David's already tuned us out, so I guess we can end the meeting now.
He's like, I'm out of here, guys.
Yep, he put us
Didn't even
on
say
mute.
goodbye.
Nope.
He's trying to beat Amber.
Yeah, they're trying to compete against each other or something now, I guess. All right, thanks, guys. Well, I'll post the recording, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Hey, wait, who's? Sorry, I might have missed this, but who's the person for next week?
I think it's you.
Okay, cool.
All right, see you guys.
See
Have
ya.
a good one.